Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 139, and in this episode I'm joined by David Shepard. For almost 30 years, David has been empowering people to make significant changes in their own lives, with his biggest focus being on helping get people the results they want fast. As the founder and owner of one of the world's leading NLP coaching, timeline therapy, hypnosis and Huna coaching companies, he's helped thousands of people improve their career, health and relationships. Their mission statement is simple: to make the seemingly impossible possible, and their clients experience just that. Coming from an engineering background, David's mission has been to precisely distill the science and application of NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, and other powerful mental technologies into a business in a box. He was fortunate enough to be mentored for almost a decade by some of the most respected individuals in the empowerment world. As opposed to many other trainers who teach the theory without the benefits of having experienced it in action themselves, David's trainings go beyond simply equipping people with the knowledge of what to do. His experience of using all of these technologies in action with people from all walks of life in many countries for many, many years allows him to provide people with both the experience and confidence to make their sessions work regardless of what happens in the room. And in this episode, David and I are going to be discussing how you can use NLP 2.0 and the power of Hawaiian Huna to benefit your life. So David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thanks for inviting me.
So as people who may or may not have listened to the very first episodes, I shared that I first got into personal development many, many years ago, and kind of unknowingly had been using something that you know very well and is going to be a big topic of this conversation, being NLP, from a very early age. In fact, from even the age of about 13 years old, I discovered this idea of what I could do is I could find people that were better than me, doing things better than me, and I could basically, what I called at the time, copy their behavior. Obviously, as we might call it, modeling these days, but copy their behaviors and be able to improve and get better. And as time went on, one of the things I became obsessed with was learning how people think. Because my view is, if I could learn how they think, if I could learn why they do what they do, it would enable me to become a better version of me. And that's basically been my blueprint for many, many years that I've used. And I share that because as time went on, I then come across NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and it has altered the course of my life for the better for so many different reasons. And obviously, it's one of the areas that you are a true world leading authority on. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you about it.
Yeah, me too.
So let's kind of go back. So these days, you are, as we've just heard, regarded as one of the world leading authorities in NLP. A lot of the big names that people know of in neuro-linguistic programming are people that have trained with you or you've actually trained over the years. So hearing it from the legend himself, what is NLP?
So NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, as you've quite rightly said, is really a model of how the human mind or the human brain works. And, you know, even with the advances in computer science, I think it's still, you know, today held that the human brain is the most powerful computer on the planet. But when we took delivery of this most powerful computer on the planet, we didn't get an instruction manual. So how do you actually harness the power of the human brain? So a couple of things. NLP actually teaches you how to use your brain and use it most effectively to enable you to create the kind of results that you want in your life. Though also another facet of NLP is how do we communicate effectively from our brain to somebody else's brain to enable us to get our message across. And then, you know, I get a lot of people say that they have problems with communication. They have problems having people understand what they're saying. But for many of those people, they think the problem lies with the person who's receiving the communication, not with them as the transmitter of the communication. So therefore, they don't solve it, but they've got somebody else to blame. Whereas NLP puts you in the driving seat, not only the driving seat of your own brain, but also the driving seat of your communication with other people. Those are two major things that I think something you've already mentioned. Therefore, it enables us to find a true model of excellence. Somebody who can do something that we don't know how to do, but we want to be able to do it. These would be people that probably would be called naturals, natural presenters, natural salespeople, natural influencers, natural parents, natural partners. And NLP enables us to extract from that person how they do what they do, and then install it in ourselves so that then we can begin to create the same kind of results that these naturals do. This has been a big thing for me because I'm not a natural born presenter. I'm not a natural born salesperson. I'm not a natural born entrepreneur. And so everything that people see me do, I used NLP to be able to do it.
Amazing. Well, we can get into that in a minute. And I remember, I think I actually used this example on the podcast before, that one of my first experiences of this, I must have been about 12 years old. And there's a friend of mine, we're about the same height, we're about the same size. And he was a really good long distance runner. And I just kept getting to the point where go running around the roads or whatever, or wherever it was, and I would just want to give up. But he didn't. He kept going. And I remember asking him one day, I was like, what is it that you do that you keep going? And what he actually said to me at 12 years old, he said, well, I look at the lampposts and I'll go, I'll just run to the next one. And I get to the next one and I'll just go to the next one. And that was one of my first conscious memories that I have of finding and learning from somebody else what it is that they do. What was their thought process? We're about the same size. We ate the same foods. We did the same stuff. So physically we're the same. But that little thought in his head of, I'm just going to run to the next lamppost and the next and the next and the next was one of the things that drove him to be able to go so much further. But of course, NLP has so many more applications than just being able to do long distance running.
Yep.
So in terms of you, so let's just get, one of the things I'm always personally fascinated by is why people do what they do, particularly if they're in the sphere of helping people, which you very much are. I mean, there's literally tens of thousands of people that you've worked with directly and hundreds and thousands, probably millions that have been impacted as a result of the work that you do. But why?
Well, it started out for me, I think, in the late 90s. I had a very successful career in the city. I worked for Reuters Trading Room Systems. And so it would appear that, I had it all in my late 20s, very successful career, making a lot of money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But about 1990, I became quite disheartened with that. And I decided that I wanted to go out and have my own business. And so I bought a franchise for a management consultancy company, which I have to admit, I didn't make work. It was a financial disaster for me. But this company was very, very, very forward-looking in that part of the franchise, you got trained in how to become a management consultant. And there was one day out of that training program, which was on this thing called NLP, which I'd never heard of. And I went like, wow, this is amazing stuff. Where do I find out more? And the trainer said, well, I'm only aware of one book. It's called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. So I ordered that because you couldn't get that in WH Smith's like you can today. You had to order it from specialized companies, and everybody had a coach. This is in 1990, which, those points in time, a coach was somebody who you had if you played tennis or a coach was something that if you came from Nottingham, you went on holiday on. that was a coach at that point in time. And so that introduced me to NLP and personal development. And I just decided at that point in time that that's what I wanted to do. It was this click. I don't want to do electronics anymore. I don't want to do computers anymore. This is what I want to do. So I shifted my business. I started teaching and using NLP with clients even before I'd done a formal training in it. But I believed that my destiny was to create world-leading NLP-based sales training.
Right. Okay.
And and I was doing that, and it was going well, and so I thought I better get trained. So there was no NLP training that really floated my boat, if you like, in the UK. And so I decided to, literally sell everything I got to be able to go to California to do a practitioner training. This was May 1993. To be able to learn NLP, to be able to create world-leading sales trainings. That was what I believed that training was about. It wasn't. It's a bit of a cliche now, but during that week, unexpectedly, through the experiences I had, my entire life changed. And in that moment, I went, this is what I want to do. And so I went to somebody who then became a mentor of mine and also became a personal friend of mine, Dr. Tad James, who died a year or so ago, unfortunately. And I said to him, there's nothing like this in the UK. There's nothing like this in Europe. I want to do what you do. How do I do that? And he said, nobody had ever asked him that before. So he said, I'll have to think about it. He came back to me a couple of days later with a whole series of things that I have to do. I had no clue how I was going to do it, how I was going to be able to do it physically, how I was going to afford it, anything like that. But over the lunch table, I experienced my mouth opening and I went, okay, I'll do it. And then my conscious mind, my thinking mind came in and went like, what have you just agreed to? How are you going to do this? And as I say, the rest of it's history. And I've been doing that, been doing this now for nearly 30 years.
Amazing. So what was it? Because I talk a lot about what I call lightning moments. So I had my own lightning moment. Interesting sort of, I think his book's behind me. Yeah, Unlimited Power. It's up there on the shelf. But I had my own what I call lightning moment at a Tony event 9 years ago. And in that moment, I cried my eyes out for about 15 minutes because I realized in that moment, my real driver was nothing to do. So I grew up with a belief that money equaled happiness. And I had this and I lived this. And in that moment, I realized my real drive was nothing to do with money. It was much bigger than that. It was to do with my dad and me and my family and a whole host of other people. And I vowed that I didn't want anyone else to go through the suffering that he went through and we went through. And that since that moment, I've been obsessed with anything to do with human awareness, human potential, human behavior, and have sort of continued that on. But what was it? And it may have been a sort of a combination of things, but when you went there thinking that you wanted to become or run the world's biggest NLP based sales training organization, what was the shift that you had? Do you remember the moment when you went, no, this is what I want to do instead? Can you remember that?
Yeah, no, I remember it very, very clearly. It was a number of, lightning moments, if you like, compacted in a very short period of time. Because, I did learn what I wanted to learn from NLP to do sales trainings, and I still do those now. But it was more personal stuff for me. My dad died very young. Died when he was only 52. I was 20 something. We were very close. So that was a pretty traumatic experience for me. I had the whole raft of negative emotions about it, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, the works. Then my marriage ended in divorce in 1990 when I set up my own business, my first business, as I mentioned. I didn't make it work. I wound up from having everything to living in a bedsit. I just thought that was what life was about. You couldn't change it. It was a matter of like carrying it, if you like. And in one afternoon, I had an experience of all of my anger, my sadness, my fear, my hurt, and my guilt disappearing. And I didn't go expecting that to happen because I didn't even realize it was possible. I discovered I got a major limiting belief of not being good enough, which obviously had a negative impact on every single area of my life. And in 5 or 10 minutes, that limiting belief had disappeared. If I was at school today, I'd have probably been diagnosed as ADHD, dyslexic, whatever. And my experience on that training was I got rid of all of that. So it was just mind-blowing for me. And I just thought, this is the stuff that we should be taught at school, rather than useful things like the Battle of Hastings is 1066. And I just went, right, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to enable people like me to realize that no matter where they've been in the past, they can change that and they can create a future which is very different than their past. And it was that dawning realization of, it doesn't matter where you've been. The only thing that matters is, where do you want to go?
100%.
And that was the reason why I went to TAD and went, okay, this is what I want to do. And it's still my passion 30 years later. So it goes beyond motivation. It's a purpose. It's a life purpose. It's a little bit like, you've got the one around that you want to enable 1 billion people to change their lives. That's, both of us have a goal, if you like, which is bigger than us, that we'll never achieve. It's a little bit like your friend running to the next lamppost.
Yeah.
What we do, there's always another lamppost.
Yeah. I refer to it as a North Star. So in the work that I do with my clients, I talk about what I get them clear on their North Star. And there's quite a famous story, you've probably heard of it, involving a baby born in December a couple of thousand years ago, or so the story goes. And the three men, they never went to the North Star, but they used it as a guiding light. And that principle, for me, that 1 billion people, I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to work with 1 billion people directly. What I do believe is that if people achieve their full potential, not only will it benefit them, it will benefit their family, their friends, their community, their society, humanity, the universe. That's the ripple effect that's possible. So yeah, I get it, and I can certainly empathize in that respect. So thank you for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that. A lot of people, and you know this because you've experienced it with people, and I've experienced it with people. There's a huge amount of people for various different reasons, but right now, and there'll be people listening to this right now that fit that category of, I'm not good enough. They've got that little internal voice. No matter how much they've succeeded or not succeeded, they may have that it may be to do with an area of their life. So there might be an area they think they are good enough, and there's other areas they think they don't. But if right now someone is thinking, I'm not good enough, and obviously NLP, the way I look at it, is like a toolbox of tools, of things that you can lean on. What's a way that someone right now could start to make that change so that they can let go of not feeling good enough and create a different future?
Yeah. So I think the thing, obviously, that's what we would call, from an NLP point of view, a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally believe that everyone is born with infinite potential. But then through our experiences that we have early in life, things get overlaid over that infinite potential. It never disappears, but people can't find it. So for me, infinite potential was hidden by this belief of I'm not good enough. So therefore, I was never good enough at school. My marriage ended because I wasn't good enough. My business failed because I wasn't good enough. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And because you've got this belief of I'm not good enough, what you do is you go through life collecting evidence to prove it's true. And so what happens is every single time that you have an experience which proves you're not good enough, what you end up doing is patting yourself on the back and going, see, told you I wasn't going to. And then, my experience from my NLP practitioner training, the big one didn't actually come really from NLP directly. It came from this set of techniques called timeline therapy. And timeline therapy enables you to literally very, very quickly go through your past and release negative emotions from the past, things that you've carried around, things that, when I did my practitioner training, I was 30. So it enabled me to let go of 30 years of anger, 30 years of sadness, 30 years of fear, 30 years of hurt, 30 years of guilt, which was just massively releasing. But then there's a technique in timeline therapy where we can actually find whereabouts in a person's past they made the decision that they weren't good enough. Yeah. And then actually go back to that first event where they decided they weren't good enough and change the meaning of it. To realize in actual fact that it was a mistake, and to remove it from their mind. So not only does that, what that actually does is, and this I still find 30 years later profound, is that in NLP, we can enable somebody to change a belief. So they go, okay, for 30 years, I've believed I wasn't good enough. Now I believe I am good enough. But they've still got 30 years of evidence to say that that's not always been the case. Whereas in timeline therapy, the difference is a person would go, I am good enough. And actually, I've always been good enough. Which is, really rewiring your brain and rewiring your past.
Very powerful. Yeah.
I teach timeline therapy. So the creator of timeline therapy, Dr. Tad James, passed away a year or so ago. So now, and I wish this wasn't true. There's no one on the planet been teaching and practicing timeline therapy longer than me. It used to be Tad. I wish it still was Tad, to be honest. But I've kind of now carry that mantle forward to enable, and my intention is to enable as many people as possible to discover what they can actually do.
Amazing. What David, one second, right? I just want to get, for the people that are watching this on YouTube, I want to get something that might make you smile. So I've got. So I was gifted once this.
Right.
Which was, so for everybody that's listening to this and not watching this book that I was gifted from a dear friend is Timeline Therapy and the Basis of Personality, written by Tad James and Wyatt Woodsmall. And this is a 1988 version of the book. I mean, it's not super ancient, but it's getting there, you know. And to this day, I have a blog of books that I keep. So I'm an avid learner, and every year, once a year, I update my favorite books, and it's all broken down by sector. It's probably like you. I mean, I can see there's thousands of books behind you.
There's about 3,000 books in this library.
Wow. So I get asked on a weekly basis, well, what book should I read? And I was like, well, where are you? What's your interest, etc. So I just put together this document, and when it comes to sort of coaching and coaches that want to learn, that sits sort of solidly up there, probably in one of the top, definitely in the top 10, probably in the top 5 actually, when people have asked me about coaching. But incredible.
Yes, it's a brilliant book, and that's how I discovered Tad.
Right. Wow.
Because I was at an NLP conference with a friend of mine, and he'd already done practitioner. I think he might have done master practitioner training, and there was a bookseller there, and he said to me, "Oh, you should get this book." Just see if I can find it here. That book there. For those of you who are listening, this is another one of Tad James's books, The Secret of Creating a Future, which is a novel. It's a novel about this young boy who meets a wizard called Mylon, and he asks the wizard, how do I create my future the way that I want it? And that's, it's a novel basically about timeline therapy. And then I saw timeline therapy and the basis of personality. So I thought, I said to this friend of mine, I'll get this one too. And don't bother getting, that's way beyond you.
Oh, wow.
So now, is there a particular book that I've got to get? Absolutely. Not only did I buy The Secret of Creating Future, I also looked at timeline therapy and the basis of personality. And, in the back of the book was details about how you contacted Tad's training company, which was based in Hawaii at the time. And that was the link that put me on the path to going and training with him in May 1993.
There we go.
So, Unlimited Power put me on the path of NLP. Thank you, Tony. And The Secret of Creating Future and timeline therapy and the basis of personality put me on the path of learning timeline therapy and training with the creator Tad. So thanks to Tony and Tad.
There we go.
For those early kind of like experiences.
So they're the early experiences. But something else I want to talk about is I remember seeing not that long ago that you had sort of made an announcement that you were introducing something called NLP 2.0.
Yeah.
And for people that have no idea but people that have listened to this that know about NLP, what is NLP 2.0?
So NLP 2.0, NLP 2.0. And I did kind of like introduce it. When would it have been? 2019, just before the pandemic, and I did a launch event, and I was hearing people, big names in the NLP world, NLP community, saying things about NLP which I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
So things like there are certain people that NLP doesn't work for. and that wasn't my experience. My experience was that NLP works for everybody every time, provided certain conditions are met. And then people were saying, everything's a model except science. Science is true. Everything's a model except medicine. Medicine is true. And my experience, and the way I was taught, was that everything's a model. Science is a model. Medicine is a model, which means it's neither true or false. The only question you want to ask is it useful? So I was hearing these things, and I was getting a bit grumpy, I have to admit. And then one day I went like, okay, stop being grumpy about it and do something about it. So I started to realize that over the 30 years that I'd been teaching NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, and also this thing called Hawaiian Huna, the way I thought about those things was different than, I'm not saying everybody, but the majority of people in the field. And so, NLP has always been a model of excellence, but it was a model of excellence created in around about 1972, 1973. And there are these underpinning beliefs, which are called the NLP presuppositions, which is the foundation upon which that model of excellence sits. And, today, 2022, the world's a very different place than it was in 1973. Think about it. The world in August 2022 is a very different world than January 2022,
yeah.
let alone 1973. So I started to then go, okay, so how have my beliefs changed over the last 30 years? And I realized, in actual fact, there was not the original presuppositions of NLP still hold true, but I realized I was teaching and using NLP from some additional presuppositions, which are what I call the presuppositions of NLP 2.0 or 2.0, which bring it up to date. And, essentially what these underpinning beliefs do is one of the presuppositions of NLP 2.0, 2.0 is that NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, Hawaiian Huna works for everybody, every time, provided certain conditions are met. Which then it becomes useful for everybody, no matter whereabouts they are in their life. It's just a matter of enabling them to experience the conditions that makes it work. So that was NLP 2.0. We had a launch event, and I thought, how do we create an event that attracts as many people as possible? It was a free event, and so I decided to call the event "Sex, Money, and Power," just to grab people's attention. And I created a launch video where I just went sex, money, power, and even with those three words, some of you going like, "That's what I want, bring it on." Others of you would be offended, but it's just three words. But notice how it changes the way you feel. And that launch video worked so well, it got taken down on Facebook because people complained about it being offensive. But we launched the event, free event, and I think we got well over 100 people there. And other people that were working with me that also worked with companies that did free events that said, well, you've got this number of people registered. The show rate is on average is 10%. Our show rate was 98%. And then they said, but, at lunchtime, the number of people in the room will halve, at least halve. And all the people we got there stayed until 8 o'clock, which kind of blew away people who work in the self-improvement industry. And that's where I launched NLP 2.0. And what I did was I demonstrated what we can do one-on-many from the stage using NLP, what we can do conversationally with NLP in coaching around assisting people in changing their beliefs. I did a demonstration of how you can use timeline therapy to enable somebody to get rid of a phobia in 10 minutes. And then I did a demonstration of using hypnosis to enable somebody to get rid of a fear of public speaking in 5 minutes, to the point where I brought them up on the stage. They couldn't even look at the audience. I did the hypnosis technique, and 5 minutes later, I had them do a presentation to well over 100 people with no preparation, to really undeniably demonstrate what these tools and techniques can do. Because I just got that massive personal belief from what I'd experienced personally, but also seen with other people. People that were probably, many people would describe as being at last chance saloon, in a matter of days. This is particularly when I did a lot of work with veterans here in the UK, where they went from having PTSD, clinical depression, anxiety disorders, etc., to within using NLP and timeline therapy within a matter of days, be in a position where they can put their life back together. And it was those kind of experiences. And it was my belief in that, from that experience, that made me grumpy about what other people were saying. So I just went like, no, that's not the way it is. So I'm going to go out there and tell people exactly the way that it is, as far as I'm concerned. And that's where NLP 2.0 was born.
Was there so NLP 2.0 was really about you showcasing and disproving the naysayers that it doesn't work and whatnot. One of the things that I've experienced in years gone by is a lot of people saying, yeah, well, NLP is very heady. It's very heady, and there's a lot of new age. I mean, maybe it's not necessarily new age, but it's certainly spoke about a lot more now about people being more heart-centered, and people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and talking about Harvard, people like organizations like Heart Math and people like that. Does NLP 2.0 incorporate that element of sort of energy as well?
Yes, absolutely. And the world has changed again. So NLP deliberately, the creators of NLP, Bandler and Grinder, deliberately made NLP what you might call mind-centric or heady, because they didn't want it to disappear and be absorbed by the New Age movement, which was taking place in California in the early 70s. The world now is a different place. And, you mentioned the word energy. If we looked 5 or more years ago as to what people were searching for in the personal improvement market, it was, how do I make more money? How do I become wealthy? In fact, that's very much what that book's about, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which I'm doing a weekly master class on at the moment. But if we looked at what people were searching for now on Dr. Google in the personal improvement space, is how do I get more energy? Because people have linked to going, the more energy I've got, the more money I can make. The more energy I've got, the healthier I'm going to be. The more energy I've got, the better my relationships are going to be. NLP had no concept of energy in it. But where I got my personal concept of energy from was from Hawaiian Huna. Because Huna is all about energy. How do we increase our own energy? And how do we use energy for healing, whether that be mental, emotional, or physical healing? So Huna is very, what people would describe as being heart-centered. So NLP 2.0 actually is a integration of NLP and Huna. So in the presuppositions of NLP 2.0, there's a lot about energy in those presuppositions. And so what I'd realized, what I came to realize myself is a lot of what I was teaching in my NLP trainings wasn't actually NLP, it was Huna. And you know, what I found is, so there are some people who gravitate towards things like Huna, but don't like NLP because they go, it's too heady. Yeah. There are other people who gravitate towards NLP, but don't like Huna because they think it's too fluffy. Whereas because I integrated the two, I'd got people who were more gravitating towards Huna would go, I'm now interested in NLP because of the way this guy teaches NLP. Or there are people who come and do an NLP training and they go, I'm actually quite interested in Huna because of the way this guy teaches Huna. Which is why I created this Facebook community, which is called Real World NLP and Huna. So it's how do we integrate NLP and Huna in a way that we can use it in the real world. And I do a weekly free masterclass, where the one we're doing at the moment, we're halfway through, is that, you know, seminal work, Think and Grow Rich. A lot of people say that's the first ever personal development book, written in about I think it was published 1937, something like that. But what I've been doing is taking a chapter a week and analyzing that chapter through the ideas of NLP and Huna to make to bring that book up to date to 2022, but give people specific processes and specific strategies from NLP and Huna to make it work in the real world in 2022.
So thank you. And what a transition, because my next question was going to be, is you've mentioned Huna on quite a number of occasions, Hawaiian Huna.
Yep.
What is it?
Okay. So Huna is the original, what we might call spiritual practices of the people of Hawaii. And when I did my practitioner training, May 1993, there were some additional early morning classes. And because I literally invested everything I've got to be there, even though there was this morning session on Huna and I got no clue what it was, I thought, I'm going because I want to get the maximum value out of this. So I got up early and went to this morning session on Hawaiian Huna. And Tad opened the training with an ancient Hawaiian chant, which we can prove is at least 750 years old, but many people would say is as old as 35,000 years old. I didn't speak Hawaiian. Tad started that chant, and all the hairs on my arms stood on end. I was like a cat that had plugged myself into the main socket. And even though I knew consciously I'd never heard the chant before, I knew what was coming next.
Wow.
So I went, whoa, I've got to learn Huna. Which at the time you could only learn Huna in Hawaii. And there's no getting around it. Hawaii is a long way away from London, right? So therefore it's expensive. So I went, how am I going to get to learn Huna? And I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my NLP practitioner, master practitioner, and trainers training, so that I can set up an NLP training business in the UK to make the money so I can fly out and do Huna training in Hawaii. So I went out to do my first Huna training in 1994. And then started teaching Huna in Hawaii in 1997. So it's the original spiritual teachings of the people of Hawaii, and it's a spiritual practice. So it's not a religion as we call it today. It's a scientific study of things of a spiritual nature. So interestingly, I've got this wall chart here. So if people are actually able to see this, because in Huna, they believed that we had three minds. So NLP, if it's taught in a very mind-centric way, is all about conscious mind. It's about your thinking. Timeline therapy then also, and hypnosis also introduces the fact that we have an unconscious mind. So we've now got a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. So NLP teaches us how to run our brain, run our mind. Timeline therapy teaches us how to use our conscious mind and our unconscious mind together to create what we might call emotional freedom. Hypnosis teaches us how to harness the power, massive power, of our unconscious mind. Huna introduces the higher self, and the higher self is who you really are. And it's who you are as an infinite spiritual being. So the ancient Hawaiians, before the missionaries arrived in the early 1800s, believed that we had these three minds, and they knew how to have these three minds work together. They also knew the importance of energy, or what they would call mana, and how to increase mana and how to use mana for healing. So before the missionaries arrived in 1820, there was little or no mental, emotional, or physiological disease in the Hawaiian people. And this is why a lot of people haven't really heard of Huna before, when the missionaries arrived, just like they did in everywhere else in the world, they made the practice and teaching of Huna illegal. So it went underground. It became an oral tradition, just like it did here in Europe with the Holy Inquisition. But because of Hawaii's geographical remoteness, although it went into an oral tradition, not written down, like one of my mentors in Huna, Uncle George Naopi, when I started training with Uncle, he was already in his 70s, but he was chosen from his family to learn Huna and the hula, the dance, and the chants when he was 3. And he was taught by his grandmother, Auntie Io, and she was already in her 90s. So the Huna that I was taught is maybe only passed down by 2 or 3 generations, whereas the original spiritual teachings here in England, as an example, has probably gone through hundreds of generations. So Huna's much, much closer to the source, which means what my experience is way simpler and way more powerful. That's the relationship, if you like, between NLP and Huna, and where I originally discovered it, because I'd never heard of it before.
So thank you, and it's extremely interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated with all these types of learnings, and it's interesting you mentioned about at the beginning of the podcast being in school and learning about, I don't know what it is, the Battle of Hastings or whatever it was. But I really enjoyed history as a kid. Now, not necessarily because I know that I'm going to use that in the future of my life, but I'm fascinated with learning about the past and how things come about, even everything from language, the root origin of words and things like that. So you mentioned that when you heard this chant, your hairs stood up on end, and we know that in NLP that NLP is essentially my explanation of it is a set of tools that enable you to better understand yourself, as you said, to better to communicate with others, and ultimately take you from where you are to where you want to go, regardless of what's happened in the past. But what does Huna do for you?
Huna, for me, did two things. One, it enabled me to take control of my own energy. And when I decided I wanted to become a professional speaker and trainer, I realized that no longer would I ever get to have a bad day. Because even during the lockdown and the pandemic, I would be up in front of an audience of some shape or form more than 200 days out of the year. A lot of people then go like, wow, David has 165 days off. No, because I've got the businesses that I run, and also got my private clients and the corporate clients and all that kind of stuff too. That's just the public stage. And no matter how much you know about NLP, are there some mornings that you wake up and it's what you call a heavy gravity day, as in you've got low energy. But I can't show up with an audience and go, I'm sorry, I woke up feeling a bit tired today, do you mind if we take it easy? Because they're going to go, no, David, I've paid for you to be here. I'm expecting you to rock up with bells on. So how do you take control of your energy? So even when you have a heavy gravity day, how do you increase your energy? And Huna teaches you that. Then the other thing I think that comes from Huna is how to connect. How to connect with yourself, but also how to connect with other people. And I think the pandemic and the lockdown brought this to the fore, because a lot of people had a problem with the fact that they couldn't physically connect with people. And there's a lot of research these days around the root cause of substance abuse, whether that be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be food, is through a deep sense that people have of being disconnected. And so Huna, one, enables you to take charge of your own energy, or what they would call mana, but also how to connect deeply with yourself, how to connect deeply with other people and the people around you, and how to connect deeply with the planet and the universe around you. in that you start to realize that at a certain level, the level of energy, if you like, we're all one. And so and it's a practice. So there are beliefs with it, but it's a practice so that you can actually experience that as the way that it is, wherever you are in the world. So, a lot of people who are into spiritual practices, like meditation as an example, go, right, I do spiritual between 8 and 8:30 in the morning when I meditate. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Huna enables you to have everything that you do be a spiritual experience.
Interesting.
Which is why I did a documentary, and in that documentary I call what Huna it gives you is a portable paradise. In the is Hawaii a paradise? Yeah. But what it enables you, learning it, what enables you to do is to take that paradise and take it wherever you go. So that no matter what you do or where you live or whatever it is, you've got your own portable paradise.
Love that definition. I've got two questions. One question, Kim, for the people that listen to this that are into NLP and understand NLP, Huna, you mentioned there's two elements. There's the maintain your own energy, and as you said, on the low gravity days when you're feeling it, and then there's the connection with others. But let's just stay with the connection with yourself for the moment. You've got low energy. How does Huna differentiate, or how is Huna different between when you're working with yourself versus take with NLP when you're changing your state, for example? So you're using some sort of anchor, or you're doing something to bring yourself back into a peak state. How is Huna different?
Huna for me is different in that when I learned NLP, and I learned NLP not in isolation, because I learned NLP in connection with timeline therapy and in connection with hypnosis. And that gives you a connection, an experience of connection with your unconscious mind, which is hugely powerful, like life-changing. Huna enables you to connect not only with your conscious mind and your unconscious mind, but also with your higher self, or what some people would call the superconscious mind. So your conscious mind and your unconscious mind are finite, whereas your higher self is infinite. And your higher self is also perfect. So it enables you to connect with the infinite perfection inside of yourself, which again is pretty. I can explain that, but the explanation can't carry the experience, because the experience is unexplainable or undescribable. But the thing, one of the things I realized that when I had an experience of connecting with my higher self, that I'd never be lonely ever again, because of this connection with the infinite, not only inside of me, but outside of me. Which again is what does that mean? I think the meaning of that goes beyond words. I think most people have had an experience of having a most amazing dream that you wanted to share with somebody else, but words couldn't describe the amazing dream. But eventually you managed to force it into these words, and then the dream didn't seem amazing anymore, because the English language is very, very useful for describing and explaining concepts, but pretty poor at conveying experience. And Huna, very different than NLP, is it's an experience rather than just what some people might call about NLP, a mind-centric set of concepts. Huna is experience.
Okay, so I want to ask the question. I don't know if this is possible or not. So I'm certainly intrigued, and I know that there'll be lots of people listening to this right now that are intrigued. Maybe someone right now is listening to this and it's early morning, and for them it's a low gravity day. Are we able to give people an experience of Huna via the podcast? Is that possible?
Yeah. So I would say there's two practices, two techniques that can give people an experience of this. One is related to energy. And it's a technique that I learned in 1993, and it's still a technique I use on a daily basis, which enables us to increase our mana and to increase our energy. And it comes from the way that we use our breath. So there's a particular technique in Huna, which is called Ha breathing. And Ha is breath. So if you looked at the word Ha Vai E, Ha is breath, Vai is life force energy, and E is supreme. So the meaning of Avai is the supreme life force energy that rides on the breath.
Wow.
There is a physical place called Avai, but also the deeper meaning of it is the supreme life force energy that rides on the breath. And so a Ha breath is we breathe from the diaphragm. We breathe in through the nose, and then we breathe out, making the Ha sound. Yeah. And we make the out breath at least twice as long as the in breath. Yeah. So let's just do 4 Ha breaths together and notice how it changes our energy. So deep breath in through the nose. One more. So, Will, just after doing 4 Ha breaths, do you feel different?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you feel different?
Yeah, I think there's for me right now it's a bit of a the word I would use to describe it is feeling like I've like almost like the brain is tingling slightly and the body's tingling slightly, a little bit like like a yeah, it's hard to describe really. Yeah, it's but yeah, I can definitely feel a difference for sure.
So some of your viewers, some of your listeners, after doing that, might go, "Oh, I feel a bit
dizzy or like
dizzy or whatever." Yeah, lightheaded, which is good. It's free and it's legal. And though it might not be the ideal state to be in for what you're doing during the day. So there's a law in energy and a law in Huna, which is your energy flows where your attention goes. So if you've got your attention up here, then the energy that you create goes up here. Whereas, so where do you want to put your attention? you put it where we would call our solar plexus, what the Hawaiians would call the Na'au, N-A'-A-U, which is where the Hawaiians believed your unconscious mind lived, in your solar plexus, or what we would call where we have our gut feelings. So that'd be the place to put our attention when we're doing heart breathing. Now, the kahunas in Hawaii, when they were doing healing work, their belief was that if someone needed healing, it was either because they got a lack of energy or the energy wasn't flowing in their neurology correctly. So what they'd want to do is give the person a blast of energy, a blast of mana. And so they'd hard breathe together like we just did for 7 hours. So you, just after 4, your body's tingling. Imagine what it'd be like if you'd done it for 7 hours, you know. But today it wouldn't be practical to do it for 7 hours. So, but if you were to do hard breathing like that for just 7 minutes every morning, you'd have all the energy that you needed to do whatever you were doing during the day. It literally transforms your energy, your experience of energy. Also, I don't know if you noticed this as well, Will, is, a lot of people go, energy, that's going to be like drinking a pint of Red Bull, as in I'm going to be bouncing off the walls. But hard breathing gives you a very calm, balanced, and centered energy. Yeah. Then the next technique, which is around how do we connect with energy, but also enable us to have this really calm, balanced, and centered state, is changing the way that we use our vision. And in Hawaiian, the technique is called Haka, H-A-K-A, Lau, L-A'-U. And the Hawaiian language and the Maori language are very, very similar. So in Maori, we've got the haka, which the All Blacks do before they do their match. Haka means to focus. So the purpose of the haka is to enable the players to focus. The fact it scares the shit out of the opposition is just a secondary benefit, if you like. So haka is to focus. Lau is to spread out. So the way we go into the state of Hakalau is we find a spot on the wall to focus on. We focus in on the spot, and then we put our attention in the periphery. So we go into peripheral vision. Yeah. Not only horizontally, but also vertically. So you're aware of the ceiling, you're aware of the floor, but you're aware of everything around you. And this is a meditative trance-like state that you can spend your entire day in. So it dramatically increases your awareness, because your awareness goes everywhere, but remember, your energy flows where your attention goes. So now you've got your attention everywhere, your energy is flowing everywhere to everything and everybody. But it also switches your nervous system over from sympathetic nervous arousal, which is the stress response, to parasympathetic nervous arousal, which is the relaxation response. So with hard breathing combined with Hakalau enables you to be in a calm, balanced, and centered state all day, no matter what you're doing. And the people that knew Huna and were specialists in Huna in ancient Hawaii were called kahunas. And if you were a kahuna, you would never tell people that you were a kahuna. So a surefire way of knowing that somebody isn't a kahuna is if they introduce themselves as a kahuna. And even if somebody confronted them and said, "Are you a kahuna?" they would deny it. So how did you know that somebody was a kahuna? Is that when everybody else around were losing their heads, the kahuna would always be na, calm, balanced, and centered. And so how did they do that? They lived in the state of Hakalau, of being permanently in this peripheral awareness. Yeah. And, you know, Hakalau will enable somebody to move very rapidly from a state of anxiety to relaxation. So it's one of the key techniques I teach on our training Presenting Magically, because just going into a state of Hakalau as the presenter or the speaker puts you immediately, all performance anxiety disappears. And now you're in front of an audience of any size and you're calm, balanced, and centered.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And, you know, that's what I love about Huna. It's also what I love about NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis, is because, you know, I come from an electronics background. I come from a computer programming background. And in electronics, we go, if you do this, then this will happen. In computer program, we go, if we do this, then this will happen. And the way that, you know, I think about NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, and Huna is that same kind of procedural way, in that I go, okay, whether it be NLP, whether it be hypnosis, whether it be timeline therapy, whether it be Huna, you go, you do this, you do this, you do this, this will happen. So when you do heart breathing, you'll become more relaxed and you'll become more energized. When you go into Hakalau, all anxiety, all negative emotions will disappear and you'll become relaxed. If you're not feeling relaxed, you're not in Hakalau. Black and white. And that's what I love about it, because it's real tangible things that people can use in their everyday life to create the experience that they want to have.
Amazing. And so just so that the heart breathing is fantastic. So the thing I just want to double check with the Hakalau is that they focus on a particular point, but then they put their attention on what's around them, up and below. So then they're not then focused on the center point. Yeah. The attention's then gone on the peripheral. With that,
totally correct. Here's another way of doing that. You find a spot on the wall that you can look at and you focus in on that. That's the haka bit, to focus in. Now we've got to spread out, which is the lao bit. So you look at a spot and then you imagine a tennis ball floating above and behind your head. So you're looking at the spot, put your attention on this imaginary floating tennis ball, and immediately what will happen is you'll go into peripheral vision.
So you focus on the spot and then you imagine the tennis ball floating above your head. Right, okay, interesting. I do remember vaguely. So do you know Marilyn Devonish?
Yep, she's one of my students.
Right, yeah. So I remember. So two things. So Marilyn did an experience with us. It was on. I used to run something called Will's Webinars, and I'm sure it was on one of the Will's Webinars, not on one of the podcasts. And she did. I think it was a form of Huna of these chants, and she said these chants, and she said you'll notice something, and all of a sudden, when you said earlier about your hair's raising up, and all of a sudden my hair's just raised up. But what was really interesting is everybody that was on the call said the same thing, but then when people watched the recording, the same happened. Really, really weird.
Yep.
And she said it was a similar. I remember a similar thing. She was saying about an orange on the head, but yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So it's
So Marilyn studied NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and Huna with me.
Right. Okay. All of them. Wow.
Yeah, all of them. A good number of years ago, actually. If I remember rightly, it was at least the year 2000, if not even a little bit earlier.
It was she'd been doing it about 20 years when I interviewed her a couple of years back. So for those of you that are listening to this, go back, find the episode with Marilyn Devonish, and you can get stuck into that, because we were speaking about a few different things and that. But David, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining me as a guest. And I know that there'll be people listening to this going, how do I learn more from this man? How do I connect with this guy? How can they learn more about Huna, hypnotherapy, NLP 2.0, 21st century NLP? How can people connect with you? Where can they catch you? And
So number of places. As I say, we've got a community on Facebook called Real World NLP and Huna. So find that, join. And we do a weekly free masterclass on some aspect of NLP or some aspect of Huna. Then also, I've got a YouTube channel, again, called Real World NLP and Huna. Then if you want to get into more detail and actually start learning this stuff at home, we've got our online training platform at www.c21nlp.com, as in 21st century NLP.com. There's hundreds of hours of NLP and Huna training, both audio and video, on c21nlp.com. There's various levels of membership, going all the way from free, where you can, just try before you buy, if you like, all the way up to getting access to everything on there, which is just $29.95 a month. It's got all the manuals you can download. The whole thing. It's a total learning platform. And then ultimately, if you go, I want to learn more about this, and I want to learn it from David, then we do online live trainings and also live physical trainings in NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and Hawaiian Huna. You can find out more about that by visiting our website, performancepartnership.com.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll pop that link in the show notes so people can go and access that. David, Thank you for a fascinating conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you and I I could certainly sit here talking with you all afternoon, all day. Yeah. But I'm sure you've got things to be heading on with. So thank you again for being a guest. For everyone that's been listening, go and connect with David. Get in his Facebook group. I'm in it. It's fantastic. Thanks again, David.
That's brilliant. No, thanks, Will, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share some of this with your listeners around the world.
My pleasure. For everyone that's listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.